I went to this club, and one of the young girls, when she turned around, she saw me, and she broke down crying, and she just put her arms out, and she started coming to me, and she was like in tears, and she had me heartbroken. And up to today, I still think of that moment. And that was because of the impact I had on her life back then, that she really missed me, and she just embraced me. She was like, "Why did you leave us?" Stuff like that. But it really touched my heart because it just showed that how the kids really looked up to you back then when you were teaching, and just very special moments you have with children, you know.
In today's discussion, we are joined by sisters Ghyslaine, Iles, and Marijke de Riggs, two remarkable individuals who have dedicated their lives to children's ministry. They will share their journeys, experiences, and the impact they have had on countless young lives through their commitment to teaching and nurturing faith in children. Get ready to be inspired by their touching stories and heartfelt moments as they reflect on their paths and the joys and challenges of working with children in ministry.
Sister Ghyslaine, what first inspired you to get involved in children's ministry?
Prior to getting involved with children's ministry, I think my inspiration came from when my children were very small. I always loved reading Bible stories to them, singing, playing Christian children's songs around the house, within the house, and that for me was an inspiration. It was just having a love and a heart for children, and that just continued with me. And when I started going to church, and at the New Testament Baptist Church, they had a group called the Champions of the King. And so I started sending the children there on Saturday afternoons, but I would never go. And then one Sunday, one of the leaders came to me and she said, "When you bring the kids, why don't you just come and stay?" And so I did that, and I never left. And here I am some 30 years later, and now very involved with children's ministry. And so that is where my inspiration really came from, a love for children and a heart for children and teaching them the word. What about you, Marijke, Sister Marijke? What made you say, "This is where I belong"?
Growing up, our mother had what was called Friday class. And we as children had to go around inviting the neighbors' children to Bible class on Friday evenings. And we had to help with the singing while our mother played the accordion. And we had to help with whatever. And when I became a teenager, then I went out with outreach teams. And after church, we held Bible class on Sunday afternoons in the outlying villages in St. Vincent, because this is where I spent my teenage years.
Okay.
And so from that time, I've developed a love for working with the children. So.
Nice. What do you love most about working with children?
I think their simple faith and their belief in Jesus. You can just about tell a child anything and they will believe you. Telling them about Jesus is so much more, and it is a joy to see them respond to the message that you are bringing to them.
Okay.
What is one of the most rewarding moments you've had while teaching children about God?
For me, one of the most rewarding would be to see a child come to an understanding of the word and then making a response to receive Jesus as their Lord and Savior, and having a seriousness about it, expressing that knowledge that they fully understand, and that's what they would want to do. So that's quite rewarding.
Okay. How have you seen children's ministry change since you started?
Yes, it's been a while, and in my earlier years, it was not in the setting, but it was in the Bible club that was outside of the church. But over the years, because of technology and those things that are changing, you see how the ministry is changing. Back in the day, if we were going to play a song, it was on a CD, and you weren't seeing anything live. But today we have YouTube videos, and everything is live action. And so the advancing technology is really something that has been changing. Yes. What is something you used to do that does not work as well with kids today?
When I started, we had a flannel board. And it was a big board that you had to walk around with all the things that you had to stick on. and for the background and cut out the characters, and you try to incorporate the children to have them come and stick it on, to involve them in it like that. But I do not miss walking around with that flannel board at all. It is so much easier now. You click a button, and there it is for the children to see.
All right. Now, what do you think is the biggest challenge in reaching kids today?
I think it is the competition and the challenges with the various media platforms, where you try something and the children sometimes know a bit more than you, and they try to correct you. You do the best that you can, but I think the competition between the various media platforms.
Okay.
Have you ever had a moment where a child's response to a lesson really surprised you or inspired you?
Actually, I've had over the years a lot of those moments. I don't specifically remember one off the top of my head right now, but what I do remember, and this was not with a lesson per se, but it was even with a prayer, and this was really with my grandson. While driving to church one day morning, and we were praying in the car, and I was praying that the Lord, the angels would encamp round about him. And he said to me, you don't have to pray and ask God for his angels to encamp round about me. He said, his angels are always encamping around me. And that kind of just stopped me in my tracks. And I'm like, wow, he's 4 years old and he has this confidence of God. And that up to today, that resonates with me a whole lot. Have you ever had a former student come back and share how your teaching impacted their life?
I lived in Aruba for a while, and we had junior church there. And sometimes here in St. Martin, I will hear somebody shout out, "Teacher Marijke." After so many years, I don't recognize them. Mm-hmm. And then they would say, "But you used to be my junior church teacher at the Peter Boer School in St. Nicholas, Aruba." And some, I'm glad to say, still attend church and are active in serving the Lord. But every now and then, I will meet someone and they would say, "You were my teacher, and I still remember this, and I still remember that." And yeah, it makes my heart that they still remember, that they have not forgotten it or walked away from it.
Right. And that just brings me back to the question you asked before about a lesson that would have inspired me or surprised me. I remember teaching the children at junior church many years ago about the first 7 days of creation, the first 6 days, and when God rested on the seventh day. And that was a lesson that was very profound to them. And it really stood out because the parents, even the children of those who were actually teaching, kept talking about how it impacted the children so much. And it was talking about creation, everything in creation. And you know, when you go to school, they teach you that the world was created with a big bang. And so I took it from scripture and showed them how God had created everything. And so for them, they saw the moon, they saw the stars and a whole new light. And the parents kept telling me for weeks after that, like the kids would just constantly be looking up at the moon, and they never heard of a blue moon or the red moon or all the phenomena that happen that causes it. So that's a story that really stands with me still today after having taught it so many years to these children.
And I remember that you brought in the animation there.
The animation.
So they could see it.
Everything.
Yeah, and they were fascinated.
Fascinated because they saw everything, the whole galaxy, how they saw the creation with the sea and the fishes and the birds in the air, and how the grass, before it had grass and all that. So it was really very impactful and very rewarding in teaching them then. Sister Marijke, with all that said, what is the funniest thing a child has ever said to you during a lesson?
I remember a little boy, we were talking about the story of Jonah and how he was swallowed by this big fish. And this little boy, he was very worried about Jonah walking around in clothes that were covered by vomit of a fish. And he was almost traumatized because he couldn't imagine it. And so I had to assure him. I said, "I'm sure Jonah rinsed out his clothes. He was right by the sea. That is where the fish vomited him out." So he went back in the sea and he rinsed out his clothes and let them dry before he continued on his journey. But remember this, and I'm wondering, why should he be so worried about his vomit being, and Jonah continuing with his vomit on his clothes? And afterwards, it was funny to me, but he was serious about it. I could laugh about it afterwards, but that is the funniest thing I remember.
But as you mentioned the story of Jonah, I remember just a couple weeks ago, I was sharing that story with my little grandson, and his reaction was, "That's crazy," when you told him about how Jonah was swallowed by this huge fish and how the fish came and spit him out and how he was in the stomach for 3 days. He was like, "That's crazy."
So do you have a story of a child who really touched your heart?
Yes, and this goes back in December. I went to visit a Bible club we were doing, the Good News Clubs, and I went to this club in Cahill, and some of the children who were there were some of the kids that I actually taught back at the church and junior church and at the Bible club. And one of the young girls, when she saw me, and this was so unexpected, she turned around, she saw me, and she broke down crying. And she just put her arms out, and she started coming to me, and she was like in tears, and she had me heartbroken. And up to today, I still think of that moment. And that was because of the impact I had on her life back then, that she really missed me and she just embraced me. She was like, "Why did you leave us?" Stuff like that. But it really touched my heart because it just showed that how the kids really looked up to you back then when you were teaching, and just very special moments you have with children.
She do.
Yes.
Thank you, Sisters Ghyslaine and Marijke, for sharing your 30-plus years of wisdom, laughter, and heartfelt moments in children's ministry. From the tearful reunion in Cahill to Jonah's unforgettable fish vomit dilemma, your stories remind us that even the smallest lessons can leave eternal imprints. To our viewers, if this conversation stirred your heart, share it with fellow parents, teachers, or volunteers. Subscribe for more insights on nurturing faith in the next generation. And leave a comment below. Tell us your favorite Bible story to teach children, or a moment that transformed your ministry journey. As Proverbs 22:6 says, "Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it." Keep sowing seeds of faith. Trust that God will bring the harvest. Until next time, may your work with the little ones be filled with joy, patience, and divine purpose. Blessings.